Right, welcome everybody to this episode of Brookwood Bites, and today we are joined by Kieran Donovan, who is the former head of global supply chain and logistics with Mountain Warehouse and the White Company, and now he's a very successful interim supply chain consultant. So welcome, Kieran. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, great to be here, Alistair.
Good news. Do you want to just introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself, Kieran.
Yeah, sure. As you've said, most recently I had a couple of senior roles in supply chain at some very successful retailers, Mountain Warehouse and the White Company. Before that, I spent a long time working at Marks and Spencer, doing a whole variety of roles across supply chain, business systems, program management, and retail. Also spent some time at the Arcadia Group, and since the start of 2020. Impeccable timing, really. I've been working freelance as a consultant, which has certainly created some interesting opportunities, which have all then gone a little bit quiet. But fascinating times at the moment. Absolutely.
I mean, just touching on the market conditions and what you've spotted so far, have you noticed any particular trends across the industry and anything that's coming out of this current crisis?
Yeah, I think it's a supply chain and logistics thing, but I think it's also more broadly across society as a whole, a big trend towards digitization in many ways, a big push towards cashless from a retail perspective, which I think is going to be a really key trend over the next few years, and it really will in some respects see the death of cash. But then I see just even by what we're doing today, a year ago we'd have probably sat down in an office and done this. We're now doing it online via tech. And that embedding of tech even further in our lives, I think, is a massive trend. And there are some really interesting emergent technology, stuff like AI, predictive analytics, that I think are going to gather massive pace now in 2020 and 2021 as the industry and society as a whole really starts to grapple with what's going on. So I think that's a really big one. I think the other one that's driven home to me is there's a limitation to what any model can forecast or plan for. Yeah. So this is supposed to be a black swan. It's supposed to be a 1 in 100 year event, but we seem to be having black swans every 5 to 10 years. And for me, that leads on to some of the stuff I'm going to cover in a bit, that no matter how good your modeling is or how good your demand forecasting or supply planning is, you're always going to get caught out by something.
Of course. So, I mean, you briefly touched on it there, and you've obviously talked a lot about tech and trends and what organizations could be doing. So in your opinion, what should organizations be doing now to, I suppose, shape and plan for the future, and how are their supply chains going to take shape now?
Yeah, I think there's a very short-term challenge, which hopefully won't be with us more than 18 months by the time we have some viable vaccines or treatments, but how to run a physical supply chain when everyone has to socially distance. I think what Next are doing is really interesting. They're trying to run a socially distanced warehouse. They trimmed the range right down, and they managed to trading for about 2 hours in the morning, and that's it. So I think there's going to be an immediate kind of 6, 12, 18-month challenge for everybody in the industry about how we make that work. And I think I certainly don't have the answer yet, because I think we're going to have to work it through rather fast and try and figure out how we make that happen. I think beyond that, the biggest driver for me is going to be about building resilience and flexibility into whatever we do. I think a lot of the challenges that we've seen, be that with home delivery of groceries or clothing retailers before the shutdown in the UK struggling for stock, there's going to be a trend towards nearshoring. There's going to be a trend towards building more resilience into the supply chain. And I don't mean carrying another 6 weeks of worth of stock, but being able to be more responsive. But also having capability and assets in your supply chain that you can redeploy across different channels. So not being just focused on home delivery or just focused on physical retail, but really having the ability to move around your capability to where you need it most. And I think that's the kind of stuff we're really going to have to start grappling with. And the fact that probably for a few years we're going to have a very low growth world. So we're going to be back to 2009 and working very, very hard to make any money.
Yeah, no, which is fair enough. I think you've raised some brilliant points there. It's really interesting what you touched on about the nearshoring, and I suppose being a really reactive kind of industry now, rather than, as you said, stockpiling and holding stock for a longer period of time. How quickly can we move, and what things can we do? So what do you think's, in your opinion, going to be the biggest lessons or takeaways from this, and what can the supply chain industry as a whole learn, and how can they grow, I suppose?
I think for me, it's a massive opportunity for supply chain as an industry. We've suddenly become front and center of government briefings, of page one of every newspaper. Not always for good reasons, but people are talking about logistics and supply chain in a way that they've never really done before. You had the Chief of General Staff at the Number 10 press briefing yesterday afternoon talking about it's the biggest logistics challenge he's seen in his entire career. I think it's an opportunity for supply chain to really seize the conversation and talk about what we need to be doing, or the opportunity that we can create, the value that we can add to organizations and to society as a whole. And we really need to seize that and respond to the challenges that have been thrown, but also show what we're capable of. I think it's a tremendous opportunity because our profile has literally never been higher.
Agreed, yeah, I think you've raised some brilliant points there. It's been really insightful talking to you, actually, Kieran, because you've touched on quite a lot of the future tech and the future trends, and it's brilliant to get that take on these things. So I really do appreciate your time this morning, and thanks ever so much. I suppose just before we move on, one final question I'm asking everybody is, what's the one thing outside of work you've done most during this lockdown period?
I think the answer is supposed to be a huge amount of exercise.
Right, yeah.
The reality is that just before lockdown came, I went and bought a Sri Lankan cookbook, and I've gradually been working through that page by page. So it has to be a lot of cooking. But it's been very, very good. It's a very good cookbook, and I'm very happy with it.
Good. Okay. You might be needing another one soon then. Fair enough. Good. All right, brilliant. Well, thank you, Kieran. We really do appreciate your time. That's the end of this episode of Brookwood Bites, featuring Kieran Donovan, former head of supply chain and logistics for Mountain Warehouse and the White Company, now available for his next interim supply chain contract.
Thank you.
Cheers, Kieran. All the best. Take care.
Nice one. Cheers.
Bye-bye.